My name is Ortloff. I'm the proud supervisor of LoRa, and I'm looking forward to presenting a different work now, which is a re-replication study I conducted together with my co-authors, of whom Jenny, who's also going to be presenting in this session, and Florin are also in the audience. This is the second replication of Yoon et al.'s No One Can Hack My Mind study, and the original study was conducted in 2014 and then published in 2015 here at SOUPS. And then there was a first replication and extension study conducted in 2018 and published in 2019 by Busse, Schäfer, and Smith. And now we conducted our study in 2024, and that brings us to the present here at SOUPS 2015. So I just want to briefly introduce the methodology of the original study and then the changes that have been undertaken since. So the prior studies conducted interviews with security experts to inform the survey design of a survey geared at, again, experts, but also non-experts. And then the surveys had 4 parts. So the non-experts were first asked a question on the top 3 security behaviors, which they did, followed by questions on participants' behaviors regarding specific security behaviors, so whether they do it or not, and to what extent, and then how they rate security advice with respect to how effective and how realistic they think it is, and finally, some questions on demographical information. And then the expert survey is similar to the non-expert survey, but has some differences. So first, the experts were asked an additional top 3 questions, this time on the recommendations for non-experts rather than only their own behavior. The behavioral questions were the same. And then since experts don't have as much time in the original study in 2014, experts were asked only 1 question per piece of advice. That was how good they thought this advice is in regards to effectiveness and realism. And then the demographics were a bit different, but they're not that much relevant for this talk here. And both earlier studies identified differences between expert and non-expert behavior and the advice ratings. So if you conduct surveys, then you probably already know this, but it's not considered good practice to have these double-barreled, so-called compound questions where you ask multiple questions rolled into one. So the first replication study sort of changed up the design to investigate this issue by having half of the expert answer the original compound questions and for the advice rating, and then the other half of the experts actually getting asked 2 questions differently for the effectiveness and realism of advice in an A/B design. And they found that for some of the advices, there were actually differences in regards to that. Some of the experts thought that advice like use strong passwords or use 2-factor authentication were considered effective, but not realistic. So now up to the present, in our current study, we sort of changed up the interview procedure in that we conducted interviews at 3 different venues, using the first round of interviews at an UPS event to inform updates to the survey because security practices have changed over the past 10 years, and then using the results from the surveys as input and as prompts for experts in the second and third round of events at Black Hat Europe in London and at the C3, which is sort of a hacker conference in Germany. We also obviously then updated the surveys to account for changes in IT security since the prior iterations, and based on the first round of interviews and literature research, we added questions on different authentication methods, which are often used as second factors, like the use of hardware tokens, of authenticator apps, of passkeys and biometrics for authentication, and also added questions on 3 further security-related behaviors, checking app permissions, sharing personal data online, and asking LLMs for security advice. Because this made the surveys longer, we, with a heavy heart, decided to revert back to the original compound question for the expert survey because it's already hard enough to recruit experts as it is. For the non-experts, we initially wanted to compare an mTurk sample, like in prior work with the same criteria as in the earlier studies, to a representative US prolific sample, but the data quality in our mTurk pilot was so low that we decided to only focus on prolific. And we saw indicators of AI-generated or bot data in the mTurk pilot data. So we stopped that avenue of our research. So now that we're up to date with the methods, let's have a look at the results. So in this slightly overwhelming graph, you can see the answers to the top 3 questions of the top 3 behaviors of experts at the top and then non-experts at the bottom for all 3 years where the study was replicated. So the data from, most recent data from 2024 are the darkest bars, and then the data from 2014 are the lightest. And for the experts, there were clear top behaviors in that there was a lot of focus on using password managers and two-factor authentication in what experts consider their top 3 behaviors. And for non-experts, there was sort of more variety across the boards. And note that we only included behaviors in this graph which at least 10% of one group in 1 year reported over all 3 iterations of the study. So there's a long tail of behavior that's not visible here. And next, I kind of want to consider 2 special instances where non-experts are actually becoming more similar to experts in the last iteration of the study. And that's the use of two-factor authentication, which has risen not to the level of that experts used it, but has become significantly more frequent in the past iteration. And then the use of antivirus, which was previously like the non-experts' most frequent reported behavior in this question, which has become less frequent. So with that said, let's move on from this top 3 question to some advice ratings. And in this graph, you can see the mean ratings for some of the advice. And the expert rating means are in pink, while non-expert ratings are in blue, so dark for effectiveness and light for realism. And in general, for most advice, we can see that experts are less enthusiastic than non-experts, but this could also be due to the different measurement. So the top 3 for experts were using automatic updates, installing operating system updates, and being careful with links. And this latter was also in the non-experts top 3 for both effectiveness and realism. And in general, effectiveness and realism ratings for non-experts didn't differ that much, so there was lots of overlap in the top 3, of course, but also overall. And I also want to highlight one piece of advice where experts think it's good according to the definitions proposed by Busse et al., so ratings higher than 4, but non-experts think it's unrealistic, so ratings lower than 4, which was the use of password managers. And we've heard in the last session before how password managers are cool, but still not quite up to scratch in terms of usability. And this was a behavior that was like the experts most used, most named in the top 3. So now for the advice that we added in this iteration of the study, so there's no comparison data on these. For some advice, the difference between experts and non-experts rating is rather small, so that would apply to the use of authenticator apps, passkeys, and biometrics. For not sharing private information online and checking app permissions, the non-experts ratings were quite a bit higher than the experts ratings. Note that I'm just talking about the new rating, the new advices here. And then using a hardware token has one of the highest differences between non-experts effectiveness and realism ratings, although this has to be seen in context, so as you can see, that even that difference is not that high. And finally, both experts and non-experts rate using security advice from AI as lowest of all rated advice. So I just want to quickly zoom in on the development for 2 specific pieces of advice. Two-factor authentication had already been adopted pretty well by experts and non-experts in 2014. And in the first replication in 2018, it was one of those pieces of advice which was deemed effective but not realistic by experts. And now in 2024, there is almost no difference between expert and non-expert behavior, but note that this question asked whether people use 2FA for at least one account, so that might also be a candidate for changing up the questions in future replications. And perhaps due to mandates of 2FA for example, banking sites, this sort of is in this graph. And then again, focusing on password managers, this was also one of the behaviors that was considered effective but not realistic in the first replication. And here there's been some more uptake, both for experts and non-experts, but it still receives lower ratings by the non-experts, of course, and I believe there's still some room for improvement. So finally, I also want to share some quick insights from our expert interviews on the past and the future of IT security advice. First, concerning the increasing use of AI in the population, most of the experts who talked about these topics were about increasing risks to user privacy through users sharing their private data with AI, although one expert also called for learning to leverage AI to protect security, just as adversaries are using it to attack. And we've also seen some interesting talks on this at SOUPS this year. And then experts expect further benefits from automating security, like with automated software updates, but they nevertheless saw the need for balance between user agency and ease of use, as also is mirrored in the broader literature on this topic. And finally, experts saw the need for context-specific advice, and in contrast to 10 years ago, more devices are now connected to the internet and frequently used by a larger variety of different users in different situations, different contexts. So providing focused and context-specific advice can help users prioritize among the still overwhelming variety of security advice. So to sum it up, this is a re-replication of a study that was conducted first 10 years ago, and we found that security behavior has changed in the past 10 years, no surprise there, and there's still differences between experts and non-experts. And before I take questions, I also want to quickly add that I will be on the job market in May 2026, but I'll be sadly leaving academia, so I'm looking for industry jobs in the direction of opinion research. So if anyone has something like that come up, feel free to talk to me. And yeah, ready for questions now.